a la conferència que porta per nom Mites i fets sobre la incineració basats en dècades d'experiència danesa en valorització energètica. Mr. Christensen.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to speak today. I thought I should start telling you that I actually studied Spanish 25 years ago. But then after 3 months, I met a woman that I still spend a lot of time with, and I didn't have time to study Spanish. So you have to listen to me in English today. It never went further than that. I am from a consulting company, and we work all over the world, so I'm completely independent of any supplier's interest. So I would just like to talk a little bit about the experience from Denmark, and especially all the stories, the fears about waste incineration. So, some of the stories are, well, as I said, first I'll talk about Denmark, the true and false statements like it's expensive, it causes dioxin emissions, you don't recycle if you burn, and the public is scared, not in my backyard, and the politicians don't want to play along. All those things I'll talk about. So why is Denmark a little bit interesting? I think it is actually, because it is the country in the world that incinerates the most per capita. We are a very small country. We are only 5 million people. But it started long ago because quite some time ago in the 80s, the local municipalities in Denmark were given the task, you must ensure that there's treatment capacity for all waste, and we don't want landfills. So that was the task given to the municipalities. They were all quite small. At that time we had more than 200 municipalities in a small country with 5 million people. So they had to join forces together. 2, 3, sometimes 14 municipalities teamed together to be able to build incineration plants, to build sorting facilities, to put recycling schemes in place. And that was a very important step in achieving what we have achieved. To support that, there was new measures, fiscal measures, legislation put in place that made sure that there's an incentive to, for example, incinerate the waste that you can't recycle. So there was a high tax on landfill, we still have that, a tax on incineration, but a lower tax if you use both the heat and electricity. And perhaps the most important thing is there's a really efficient power to direct waste. This means that the municipalities can say that waste within our territory must go there. Not just the waste from residences, but also waste from industries and commerce. When you know exactly how many customers you have in the shop, all the domestic and the industrial waste producers, it's quite easy to make an efficient investment in waste-to-energy facilities, in sorting facilities, in recycling schemes, because you know how many customers you have. And perhaps the last bit is that we have an integration of the energy policy and the waste policy that makes sure that the energy produced from the waste has priority, that you can always get rid of your heat. You can always sell your electricity at a good price. That happened a long time ago. Then perhaps another thing that is interesting is that waste incineration with energy recovery started more than 100 years ago. This is the first waste incinerator that used the energy. It was built in a part of Copenhagen. You see the horses were bringing the waste there. And the incineration facility was of course quite simple. There was no flue gas cleaning. And the reason for that starting so early is that in Denmark we have no rivers. We are 100% dependent on our drinking water, and we are a lot of people in a small area. So it's very precious to us that we protect our water. And we cannot accept to have landfills like that. So that was a driving force and has been all the time. This is another case story. This is the latest plant that will be built in Copenhagen. It will be operational in 2016, and it will be built as a skiing slope, a polymeric surface, so that we will be able to ski in the summer also down the slope of that incinerator. It's going to cost quite a lot, as you can see. It has a big capacity, 2 lines, 2 very big lines, and will have a high energy efficiency. So you can see we have moved a little bit from there to there. Today in Denmark we have 29 incinerators. Some of them are very small, only 2 tons per hour, and some of them are very big, 70 tons per hour. And you could wonder, why do you have so many incineration plants in such a small country? From the top to the bottom is 350 kilometers. From the east to the west, maybe 300 kilometers. So why have so many? Well, it is because by having them near where the people live, they know that this is our waste that we're dealing with, and it's also because they are well suited in capacity, so that the size of the plants fit to the district heating network, to the local energy need. So they all have a very high energy efficiency. They can use practically all the heat. A few of the plants do have to store a little bit of the waste in the summer and save it for the winter, but generally they can get rid of all the waste all year round. We do have summers in Denmark where we don't need a lot of heat, but during the summers the waste incineration plants can cover the base load. And I know that it's a different situation here. It's nice and warm here. 1 week ago it was snowing in Copenhagen actually. I was out shoveling snow before going to work. So things are different in Europe. Well, as I said, we are the champions in waste incineration in terms of installed capacity per capita. I actually think personally that we have sufficient now. I don't see how we could have a higher treatment capacity per inhabitant than this. Actually, I think it might be reduced a little bit in the future. But there's still a far way to go for example, well, some of the other countries to that level. And it may not be required to go to that level. Okay, that was a little bit about Denmark and where I'm from. Now I'll talk about these stories about waste incineration. So, yeah, I've mentioned them already in my introduction. So let's go straight into it. Is it expensive? Well, these are the gate fees 2005, so some years back, but relatively it's the same. The typical gate fees in different countries at the moment without taxes. Actually, these plants are generally the same. It's the same technology. So why are they so different in the gate fee? That's strange. It's often a Martin or a Van Roll plant in all of those cases, or any of the other ones. So it must be something else that makes the difference. Obviously, in Northern Europe, one of the key aspects is that we have a really good revenue from the sale of heat and power. About half of the total revenue stream to a plant in Denmark is from the sale of energy. The other half is the gate fee from the waste producers. We have legislation in Denmark, and I'll talk a bit more about that later, that says all waste incineration plants must be non-profit. So they're not allowed to make a profit. That's probably one of the reasons why it's not so high. Most of them are also owned by municipalities who can borrow money at a really good interest rate, because they have the entire tax base of all the citizens of Denmark to guarantee that those loans will be repaid. So they can borrow money really cheap. If you're a private entity and you need to borrow money, you obviously you will have to pay higher interest rates, because there's a certain risk premium that is added by the commercial bankers, and you also need to generate profit.